Greetings, booktubers. Welcome back to Grammaticus Books. And today on the channel, we are going to do it. We're going to review this book here, Time Enough for Love, 1973 by Robert A. Heinlein. His most controversial book ever, hands down, not even a contest. Starship Troopers can't hold a candle to it for controversy. And we're going to try to answer the question by the end of this video. Is that controversial nature of this book, is it merited, or is it just Robert A. Heinlein being misunderstood about what he was writing about here in this book? And we're going to try, emphasis on the word try, to answer that question. So 1973, this book is published. It's by far and away his longest book at over 580 pages, and it deals with his character Lazarus Long. Lazarus Long is his future history's main character. He is the oldest person in the universe at over 2,000 years of age. And at the start of the book, Lazarus Long has returned to the planet of New Rome, where he wants to pass away peaceably. He is tired of life at 2,000 plus years old. However, his descendant, one of his many hundreds, if not thousands of descendants throughout the galaxy, is running the planet. Ira Weatherall, the chief pro tem of New Rome, he discovers that Lazarus Long, the quote-unquote senior, is there, and he cannot permit him to die. It would be a crime against the Howards, and I'll explain the Howards in a second. So he captures Lazarus Long, puts him into a rejuvenation clinic that is actually a prison, and then is there trying to convince him that he should regain his lust for life, and he should tell him the story of his life so they can narrate it down and get it down for posterity and for history of the Howards. Now, the Howards are people who are progeny of the Howard Project, and the Howard Project was started on Earth in the 1800s by a very wealthy entrepreneur who set up this breeding program in order to put people together to marry people who are naturally long-lived in order to create other long-lived people and then marry them together in order to create I don't want to say a race, but a line of human beings who are exceptionally long-lived. And Lazarus Long is the pinnacle achievement of this project, the Howards. And then the Howards move out into space in the diaspora, and they maintain the Howard Foundation and the Howard Project through the thousands of years into the future. So that's the Howard Project. So it sets up Lazarus Long here, and Ira Weatherall will not permit him to die. And Lazarus figures out that he's in this rejuvenation clinic that's actually a jail, and he demands to have his suicide switch installed, because the basic fundamental right of every human being, according to Robert A. Heinlein, is the right to take their own life. So Ira Weatherall does install a suicide switch, but it's a dummy switch. And during his conversations with Lazarus Long, Lazarus has hit this suicide switch at least 4 times. But instead of killing him, all it does is knock him out. Then they go in, they erase his memory of the past several hours, institute a false memory, and then wake him up where he was before he hit the suicide switch, as they continue to try to convince him to gain back his lust for life and continue living. And Lazarus finally agrees. He agrees to tell his story, and that he will stay alive long enough in order to tell his past history to Ira Weatherall for the history of the Howards and posterity. Arabian Nights in reverse is how it's described, and that's an apt description of it. So he goes into his stories, and then you get a series of short novellas that are stitched together by Lazarus Long, talking about how he lived these experiences, and you get sort of a composite novel going there forward. And it focuses on love. It focuses on every aspect of love that you could think of, from man for woman, for husband for wife, for platonic relationships, sister for brother, artificial intelligence with a human. I'm not joking, that goes in that direction as well. It takes that route, explores it, and all the way to taking artificial intelligence, putting it into a clone of a human body, and then that artificial intelligence then having loving relationships with other humans. And it looks at every aspect of that, and primarily the 2 aspects of love that Robert A. Heinlein defines in here, which is eros and agape. Eros is erotica love, and agape is spiritual love or divine love above the physical form. And it looks at all these aspects and explores them throughout the book. So why is that controversial? Because there's another aspect of the book here. There's another thrust to it that Robert A. Heinlein also explores, and that is the social mores of societal conventions and societal rules. And he comes at it with his typical libertarian viewpoint, because Robert A. Heinlein is a libertarian's libertarian, and he does not believe that there is such a thing as a social rule, a social construct, or societal norms that you should follow. You should only be concerned about committing acts of cruelty against human beings, other individuals, but you should not be concerned with society because societal norms only exist in the mind. And so he attacks this. He takes the most taboo societal convention, societal rule of incest, of breaking the laws of incest, and he uses that as his literary foil in order to explore this theme that there are no societal conventions, while he goes through all this story about different types of love, and he goes through the story of Lazarus Long, and he wraps it all into these various novellas that are in here. And the incest part is what makes this so controversial and so hard to digest for so many people. So I'm going to walk through the book in order, in sequence of these little novellas with a very short recap of it. We'll get to the end of it, and then I'll I will do my best to try to unpack this thing and determine what exactly is going on, and if Robert A. Heinlein succeeded in his goal at the start of the book, or if he failed. So after you get that introduction on New Rome with Ira Weatherall, having Lazarus Long in this rejuvenation center, at first I thought that this was going to be a great science fiction story, going forward with Lazarus slowly divining the true nature of his situation and turning around and trying to turn the tables on Ira Weatherall, his descendant running the planet. And then he would gain back his lust for life by trying to turn the tables on Ira Weatherall. And I thought he had this great sci-fi framework set up, but boy was I wrong, because it didn't go there at all, which is a shame because I think that would have been a great story. But instead what happens is Lazarus Long then starts to tell a series of stories. And the first one is called The Man Who Was Too Lazy to Fail. And this is a semi-autobiographical of Robert A. Heinlein in his time back in the Naval Academy in the 1920s on planet Earth, late 1920s, as war is starting to approach and World War II seems like it's going to become imminent, or at least some new conflict. And it's about a Naval Academy cadet. There you go. It's a Naval Academy. You'd think I'd know that, being in the Navy. A cadet at the Naval Academy who divines all these different ways in order to get out of doing work. He becomes an efficiency expert, not for the efficiency, but in order to decrease the amount of work that he has to do. And he volunteers for every extracurricular activity and every other type of office that he can apply to that makes his life easier and keeps him out of harm's way. Robert A. Heinlein transitions into the next story, which is The Tale of the Twins Who Weren't. Now we jump forward hundreds and hundreds of years into the future. Lazarus Long is a spaceman. He travels to a planet and he's going through the marketplace on the planet, and he sees a brother and a sister who are for sale as slaves on this market. He looks at them and he determines that there's a good chance that they're his progeny based on their looks, and he buys these two slaves, this brother and the sister, and immediately manumits them. He releases them and makes them free people on his ship, but they have lived so long of their lives as a slave that he has to then re-educate them on how to be free human beings. But these two slaves, this brother and sister that he has purchased, they're genetically unique. They're biologically unique. They're unique in that they have haploid gametes that are then introduced as zygotes into a surrogate mother. No, I don't follow all that either. I'm not a biologist, but that is loosely, that's pretty closely, I'm going to say closely, how it is explained in the book, so that they're born as brother and sister, and they are brother and sister, and they're in fact twins, but their DNA is genetically as different as two random strangers on the street. Meaning that if they get married, which they do, they get married and have children, that there's zero chance that their children could have any type of birth defects. And this is sort of the first step by Robert A. Heinlein into that subject of incest and social mores and social and societal norms. And that's The Tale of the Twins That Weren't. From there, it progresses to the next story, which is The Tale of the Adopted Daughter. Now, in The Tale of the Adopted Daughter, we've gone to another planet. It's another couple of hundred years in the future, and Lazarus Long is a colonizer on a new planet that is being colonized with a group of pioneers, and these pioneers are operating on a very low-level technology. They've been placed onto the planet, but they have to basically make do with a few number of tools and what they have as they build this planet up. The most popular means of locomotion about the planet is horse-drawn wagon or riding on a donkey. So that's the level of technology that we're talking about. And one day, as Lazarus Long is traversing this planet, walking to the town, he comes across a cabin that's in flames. He runs up to it and he's able to save a small infant daughter out of this cabin who's only a couple of years old, and her name is Dora. He then adopts this daughter as his own daughter and then raises her. And then when she gets to the age where she is in her late teens, coming into her early 20s, he realizes that he has fallen in love with his adopted daughter, and then he marries his adopted daughter, Dora, who becomes the absolute love of his life across all of his 2000s of years. And again, you're stepping into and you're dealing with that realm of incest, and he's taken it just one step further down that road in this exploration of this idea of societal norms and incest, using incest as that literary foil to explore this theme. And it's very well written. It gets a little boring in parts in the center where they're doing a pioneer expedition in order to get to their homesteading area. I found that a little slow. But again, it's well written. You're talking about a brilliant writer at the height of his powers, writing about these topics, and he does an excellent job writing about it. But you're starting to delve into the weird. So that's the end of that novella. The book then picks up with Boondock, and Boondock brings it back into the present, and you are with Lazarus Long, where he has now decided that he wants to live. He's been convinced by Ira Weatherall, the chief pro tem of the planet of New Rome, that he should continue to live. He has a renewed zest for life. And he and Ira Weatherall and another group of people who are with him on New Rome then leave for Tertius in order to form a new family. And he's building the nucleus of a new family about him. And as he's building this family, one of the ways that he does in order to expand it is he clones himself and brings about 2 female clones of himself. So they're exact duplicates of himself, except that they're female. And then as he's living with these female clones, yes, you guessed it, he impregnates both of them. So he impregnates himself, the female version clones of himself, in Boondock. And now we're starting to get into the very, very strange. We're moving further down this road of the weird incest theme as it's used in the societal norm, exploration of societal norms and libertarianism. And from there you go into the final novella of the novel, whereas he's on Tertius and he decides that he wants to go back in time. He wants to time travel back to his youth, back to the home of his youth in the United States in the early 1900s, 1916 to be exact, in order to revisit his childhood home and see what his family was like, to remember what they were like, because he's become nostalgic at 2,356 years old at this point in time. So he does, in fact, travel back to 1916 United States and locates his birth town. And at this point, the story is actually very well written. It's engaging, it's interesting. It's picked back up because he's having to negotiate a society. He's having to negotiate the 1916s United States of America and all those societal norms in this very heavily Orthodox Christian society that's going on, that's very much more conservative than today's society. And he has to be able to retain his identity, his secret identity as a time traveler, and then try to ingratiate his way back into his birth family without them finding out that he's actually Woodrow Wilson Smith, which is his birth name. He was born as Woodrow Wilson Smith, and then he later adopts the name Lazarus Long, without them knowing who he is, with himself as a 4-year-old in the home. And that is actually very interesting. It's very well written. It's very well thought out. I enjoyed it until he falls in love with his mother in the home while his dad is away in the army preparing for World War I, because World War I is looming. And Lazarus Long is doing everything that he can in order to avoid getting caught up in the First World War. And he's there in the home with his mother and himself, and he falls heavily in love with his mother from both eros and agape. And at this point, the novel has not, all of this talk of sex and love and intercourse that occurs throughout the novel has not been on a pornographic level, thank goodness. It's talked about very frankly, sort of the level of like how a farmer would discuss various body parts and animals mating. That's sort of the tone of the previous part of the book. But at this point in the book, there's no other way to say it. The book becomes pornographic with his mother in his home, in his ancestral home, while his 4-year-old self is running around in the home. And it just becomes bizarre. The weird factor just shoots off of the scale and goes up into the stratosphere. And After that session is concluded, he does get caught up in World War I, even though he's been trying to avoid wars his entire life. His whole motto has been to do everything he can possible in order to preserve his physical safety and make his life enjoyable. And that involves avoiding wars at all costs, which is one of the ways he's stayed alive for over 2,000 years. And suddenly all of that has changed, and it's changed because of his host family and because of his grandfather who was in the house with his mom. And he wants to make sure that he's doing everything to impress his mom, to ensure her future and her family's future and reputation, and to appease his grandfather. And he winds up in the middle of this horrible conflict over in France, and he finds himself in some of the most dangerous situations over in France. And that's where the book concludes. And I won't give away the ending, although we've had a number of spoilers in here. So it concludes very, very satisfactorily, the very, very ending. Once he has moved out of the house and you have that whole ancestral relationship with his mother has come to a termination, the book gets very interesting again. This book it's Robert A. Heinlein at his best. It's him being just a brilliant writer, at the height of his career, at the height of his powers. And it is simultaneously Robert A. Heinlein at his worst. And he can be at his best and his worst at the exact same times in the exact same paragraphs in this book, and it makes this book very, very difficult to review. I'm going to use a term here that was coined by Michael K. Vaughan over in his great channel. Heinlein devolves at times in here into Heinsplaining, where he's basically just talking down to and lecturing his reader, and that becomes annoying. And he takes this theme of incest and societal norms and libertarianism, and he dissects it, and he does it in a very good way, in a very intelligent way that's very readable. It's enjoyable from a mental standpoint. It keeps your brain functioning. But in the end, I think where he goes into Da Capo, the last novella here in the novel, and he winds up having this relationship with his birth mother, I think Heinlein takes it a step too far, one step beyond, as they like to say. And I think he pushed that literary foil to the point where it breaks at the end of the novel. And that's what people find so disturbing and so hard to be palatable when they're reading this book. And I can completely understand where they're coming from. Now, I don't think I can assign a rating to this book. I don't think I can do it. I can't give it a number. It's just too diverse. It's too complex. If you like Robert A. Heinlein, there's going to be a tremendous amount of this book that you're really going to enjoy. If Robert A. Heinlein isn't your favorite, this book is probably going to turn you off, and it's going to turn you off fairly early on, and then it's going to really turn you off towards the later stages of it. It turned me off. I got to be honest. I thought that the last incestual relationship was one step beyond. He pushed it too far when he did that, and he sort of broke his structure and framework that he had set up. And it's too bad, because I think if he had stuck with that initial framework that he had going, where Lazarus Long is a prisoner in the rejuvenation clinic, and he's working with Ira Weatherall, and he agrees to do this reverse Arabian Nights, and then slowly you could have turned that into a story in itself, where he regains his zest for life in order to get back at and defeat Ira Weatherall and turn the tables on him on New Rome. I think that could have been a great book. And you could have even included a lot of the other themes in here, such as Dora, the adopter, the tale of the adopted daughter, and the tale of the twins who weren't. You could have worked that in as well. But in the end, it just goes one step beyond for me. But I can see why so many people like this book. So I'm going to leave it there. That's where I'm going to leave this one. I would love to hear your comments on this book. If you've read this book, if you have thoughts about it, please, please, please put them down in the comment section below. I do read and respond to all the comments, and I would love to hear what all you guys and gals think about this novel, and see what your opinion on it is. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up, and I'm going to say take care, be safe, and I will catch you guys next time.